Hidden architectural treasures come in many shapes and sizes. The beautiful, the unusual, and in this case, the completely mad. Without a doubt, the object of my search here in Suffolk comes under the heading of sheer folly. And this certainly isn't it. There's not even something slightly bonkers about this beautiful house, which certainly can't be said for one of its previous owners. This is Tattingstone Place in Suffolk, home in the late 18th century to one Squire Edward White. It's the perfect country residence for an English gentleman. Except for one thing, the view. In the 18th century, the fashion was to have an eye catcher, something somewhere in the view that would catch the eye. Now, Mr. White's view was all very lovely. The rolling Suffolk landscape, a couple of farm workers' cottages in the distance, a few cows. But that wasn't quite enough for our squire. What he really fancied was a quintessential English view of a small parish church. So he had two options. He could either move from this house to one that had a view of a church, or he could build one. And he chose the second option. And what resulted is one of the strangest follies in the land, the Tattingstone Wonder. To create his eye catcher, Edward White came up with a cunning plan. He didn't knock down those two farm workers' cottages. They were far too useful. In fact, as you can see, he added a third one onto the end. So where's the church, I hear you say? Simple, come round to the other side, the one that faces Tattingstone Place, and there it is in all its glory, a flint-built Suffolk church. How ludicrous. The fake church tower sits on top of the third cottage, but has only 3 walls. And the detail on this sham facade is amazing. 2 large Gothic windows at the front and a large rose window on the southeastern wall finish the illusion off beautifully. It's now a family home and not open to the public, so I feel privileged to have seen close up this wonderful construction. With the Tattingstone Wonder making his view complete, Edward White was a happy man. But I wonder what the farm workers that lived here thought of their new and extraordinary accommodation. Our next architectural treasure here in Suffolk can lay claim to being a hidden gem in 2 very different ways. Firstly, it's quite definitely off the beaten track. The second reason it's literally a hidden treasure is that for the last few months it's been completely swathed in scaffolding. This is the object of our search as it's been looking recently. It doesn't look much here, does it? But now that the work is almost finished, we can enjoy in all its glory the extraordinary Freston Tower. Standing in a magnificent position overlooking the River Orwell, the tower is 6 stories high with just 1 room per floor. It's a veritable Suffolk skyscraper. So what can I tell you about its history? Why was it built? Well, we don't really know. Who built it? We haven't the faintest idea. And when was it built? You've guessed it, we don't know. To put it bluntly, Freston Tower's history is a mystery. But there are a few theories. One rather lovely suggestion can be found in a book written in 1850 by the local parson, the Reverend Richard Cobbold. He suggested that one Lord de Freston built the tower in the 15th century as a place of education for his young and beautiful daughter, Ellen. she was to study a different subject in each room. The lower room was for charity work and helping the poor. The room on the second floor was where Ellen learnt to weave tapestry. Music lessons were held on the third floor, painting on the fourth. She studied literature in the room on the fifth floor. And on the sixth and highest floor, Ellen de Freston supposedly studied astronomy. It's also been said that Ellen used to come up here to the roof for secret meetings with a local builder who was only too happy to further her education in a different subject altogether. Now, there's just one little problem with this theory. The Reverend Cobbold was well known in his lifetime for his historical novels, and the chances are that his account of Freston Tower's history is pure fiction. What a shame. We don't even know if the tower was meant to stand alone like this. As you can see, the first 3 stories on this south side don't have any windows at all, which may mean that the tower was intended to be attached to a larger building. But so far, no evidence has been found that such a building ever existed. It may also have had the purpose of being a lookout. Why? Because at that time, this whole coastal area was under threat from pirates. They would sail silently into the estuary, moor up, and then venture inland in marauding gangs. In more recent years, the tower has fallen into disrepair. But since acquiring it, the Landmark Trust has been hard at work, restoring and converting the building into one of the most unusual holiday homes you could wish for. A place of education, a pirate's lookout, or quite simply one of England's strangest follies. Freston Tower remains an enigma, which is what I like most about this charming little building. In further pursuit of hidden architectural gems, I've come to Rendlesham Forest in Suffolk. The forest is best known for some sightings of unidentified flying objects in 1980. Some people at night here in the forest saw flashing lights. It was investigated by Americans from the nearby Air Force Base. They came into the forest, and when they left, they felt strangely dizzy and disorientated. Did they have a close encounter with a being from another world? What a load of baloney. But rest assured, you can find some flying objects around here, and they're not spaceships. They're flying buttresses, and some of the strangest I've ever seen. This is Woodbridge Lodge, hidden away on the edge of Rendlesham Forest and dating from around 1800. It once marked the entrance to Rendlesham Hall, a Gothic pile which burnt down many years ago. It's now a private house, and what a delightful one. The architectural historian Nicholas Pevsner describes it as one of the most memorable follies in all of Suffolk, and he's absolutely right. This here is a buttress, which is used to support the wall, but above are flying buttresses, which are normally used to bolster the walls of cathedrals. But here, they do absolutely nothing at all, which is exactly the point of a folly. 3 huge flying buttresses support a central chimney, and inside the main room is hexagonal in shape. The proud owner of Woodbridge Lodge is Colin Cooper. He and his family have used it as a country retreat for over 25 years. Now that Colin's retired and they spend more time here, they've added this unusual extension.
It's a grade 2 star listed building, so we're very much constrained by the English heritage and the historic buildings, this, that and the other. So we went to a local architect and he produced this extension, which is sort of basically supposed to be a fake garden wall behind which the modern building is hidden. The idea was to make a circle around the folly with the fake garden wall.
So it focuses on the folly?
It focuses on the folly, yes.
You're a member of some very exclusive club, I understand.
Yes, there's a society called the Folly Fellowship, of which that's a sort of handbook, you might say. So we get regular newsletters about even more extraordinary places.
Now, who needs flying saucers when the buildings around here are as strange as Woodbridge Lodge? Bedfield Hall in Suffolk is a beautiful manor house. The central part dates from the 15th century. The two wings were added later. Today, it sits surrounded by an impressive moat, with just the church for company, as tranquil a country retreat as you could ever wish for. It's also a house with secrets, a house that bears witness to a chilling period in its history, a time when a man called Matthew Hopkins was going about his brutal and bloody business in this part of the country. His job, Witchfinder General. His reign of terror in the 17th century saw both men and women convicted on the flimsiest of evidence. And Hopkins got 20 shillings for each so-called witch put to death. People really believed in witches, and they were terrified of the damage that they and their animal familiars could do to them and their property, and they went to great lengths to protect themselves. In the early 17th century, Bedfield Hall was owned by one Thomas Dunstan. He extended it, including the kitchen, on my right-hand side. It's in this room that the present owner discovered the considerable lengths that Dunstan went to protect himself against evil. When he built the brand new kitchen, he etched these extraordinary patterns into the ceiling. Some have 3 petals, others 6, but this basic symbol was believed to offer protection against witches.
They're distributed all over the ceiling. There's about 40 or 50 circles, some unfinished up there. But on this part of the ceiling here, which is near the entrance into the room, you'll notice there's a row of holes where food hooks were suspending the food on this side.
Marks, yes.
The black marks, yes, which I put on there. I filled the holes in. But there's a big cluster on one side here and another cluster the other, and then very individual circles put between to protect the food. You have to remember that James I in 1603 had really heated up the whole argument about witchcraft, and before that witches would get a year in jail. After that they got hung, and James I wrote a treatise called Demonology, and in that he actually says that the thing they're most fearful of is the witches can come through whatsoever openings you've got, however you bar them. But of course it's the chimney here which is most vulnerable.
Oh, dreadful, dreadful.
Indeed.
Demons come by the house.
They would, and they
they
come in the form of little beasties which are called familiars, and that's what he refers to in this document, that the familiars can come flying down the chimney and into the room, and it's those that are going to impose themselves on your family. Behind me, where this brickwork is, there's a hollow about 3 foot wide, which you can get into by lifting the floorboard, and in there were lots of different objects like shoes and chickens and things, exactly like these.
Any old junk.
Any old junk. You put them down these holes, which I call spiritual middens, because a midden is where you deposit unused things, but here they're done for spiritual protective purposes.
Spiritual midden.
These particular ones here are 17th century and 19th century and 18th century, so you get them datable from all the time. And what you can tell is that the objects themselves have still got their mud on them, so they've literally finished with them. They're no longer of any use, they're worn out. They believe that these, because they've got something to do with your family, your own person, that if you put these down there, when those little familiars come down the chimney, they are diverted off into this box, and it's a dead end. It's like a lightning conductor, and so they don't come and get you and your family. In most of the rooms I can find something which is done to help protect the fireplace or the wall or something like that. As we've seen above us, you've got the 3 and 6 petal patterns. You can use a 12 petal pattern just the same way to protect it. And he created a food cupboard next to the chimney in which he cut a ventilation grill in the shape of a 12 petal pattern.
This upper room is the original parlour chamber, as it was called. Another anti-witch symbol decorates the fireplace, and its splendid red paintwork denotes that this was the most important room in the house.
Most of the rooms in this house, and there are certainly about 12 painted rooms in this house, are all painted with this dark grey, various forms of black with white in it. But usually, and I found this with other houses, they choose one colour to denote the best room on the upper floor, and it's usually either red or green. Downstairs the best room would probably be panelled, wind-sealed, but here it's painted red. And you'll notice also that there are little ornamentations to the top and the bottom.
Yes, I've noticed that just here, you can see them, yes.
Yeah, well, what they're actually doing is converting these into a little classical room, and these are from around about 1620s, 30s, and this is really the new type of decoration that's coming in. They're getting away from the idea of having painted cloths, hangings on the wall with all the very, very fussy decoration, and getting to this much simpler form of decoration.
So decorate the room rather than the hangings and the furniture in it. Now that fireplace, it doesn't look like real brickwork.
Well, it is real brickwork, but it's painted, and all brickwork between 1500 onwards was all covered in paint in this sort of way.
So why paint perfectly good bricks?
Because they didn't like the different variations of colour of brick that you get in the natural brick. They wanted to unify it and have a basic colour. And also, as you'll see from another better example down in the hall, they smeared the bricks round because the bricks weren't a regular shape. And so they weren't concerned about that because they would cover it all with paint and put these nice white fine lines. And this is a process that's called penciling.
Now, when you were refurbishing this room, did you find anything else of importance and interest?
Well, there was another spiritual midden immediately above here, and we found the cover of a book and a number of other objects. And included in there also was the corner of a truckle bed. And, a bedpost, like the clothing and the shoes and the agricultural equipment, was all part of the household material. And once it ceased to function for that purpose, rather than chuck it away or burn it, they would then hide it away in the spiritual midden, and that protected the household.
You can come and visit Bedfield Hall and several other wonderful Suffolk houses under a scheme called Invitation to View. Full details are on our website. Thomas Dunstan ended up here, under the floor of the nave of the church opposite his house. And despite the macabre skull, he must have been a jolly chap. Hodie mihi, cras tibi, today me, tomorrow you. And he died in the certain comforting knowledge that throughout his life he had protected himself and his family against evil spirits. Our final example of Suffolk's hidden heritage certainly isn't off the beaten track. It stands right in the heart of Ipswich. Thomas Wolsey, Cardinal, Archbishop and Henry VIII's Chancellor, was born in Ipswich in a 15th century house just like that. He rose to become the second most powerful man in the land. Now this is very pretty, but in this case it isn't my hidden treasure. When Cardinal Wolsey was at the very height of his powers, he decided to transform his birthplace of Ipswich into a seat of learning to rival Oxford and Cambridge. He built what was intended to be a highly prestigious school in this now rather run-down part of the city. His idea was that its students would go on to study at Oxford, in fact, at a college named in his honour, Cardinal College. No expense was spared in the building of the college. Only the very finest materials were used. The stone was imported from Caen in northern France, the very self-same stone that was used for the building of Westminster Abbey. So now, let's go and see what remains of Wolsey's grand design, which was completed in 1528. Well, I'm sad to say that this is it. The entrance gate, stuck by the side of a busy road which still bears the name College Street. The rest of the magnificent Tudor building has completely disappeared. Carved in stone and set confidently above the gateway, the King's Arms. But it was Wolsey's connection with King Henry VIII that led to the building's demise. Just a year after its completion, in 1529, the great Cardinal Wolsey fell from grace. He failed to support Henry VIII's bid to divorce his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. They changed the name of his college at Oxford from Cardinal College to Christ Church, and his great building at Ipswich fell into disrepair. Well, that's all that's left. A busy road at the front and these RSJs at the back to hold the small fragment up. What would the poor old cardinal think?